Hello and welcome back to Not Overthinking. Tamor, how are you doing on this fine evening?
I'm doing pretty decently. Today I had a really good morning. I recently invested in a pair of inline skates based off a Twitter.
Inline skates.
Yeah, like rollerblades, based off of a conversation that two other people were having on Twitter, which rekindled my interest in roller skating. And so then I bought some roller skates on this guy's recommendation. Uh, I actually know this guy in real life. I'd say we're friends. He's a podcast listener as well. And so yeah, on his recommendation, bought these skates. Went out today to skate for the first time, and it was great. It was just so cool.
So what's the experience? Because last time I did I tried rollerblading was when I was like 7. So like, what's it? Is it like ice skating now these days or what?
It's like, yeah, I think it's like ice skating, but less smooth because obviously you're not on ice. So, but the skates that I got are like optimized for the streets, the mean streets of St. Albans, and so it's kind of smoother on. It's not terrible on like roads and things, and I found a nice, quiet, fairly smooth road on which I can like practice. Um, it was just great, and I think just like starting the day with a bit of physical exercise in the outdoors when it's sunny, it just like put me in a good mood for the rest of the day, and I could feel like, I don't know, refreshed or something. Like I felt lighter, for the rest of the day.
Oh, that's nice. What
Yeah.
sort of stuff were you practicing on it?
I was trying to learn how to do a parallel turn properly.
What is a parallel turn? Don't you just turn?
Yeah, but there's a way to do it properly, and then once you can do that, then you can also stop properly by like spinning in a circle.
Oh, cool. Rather than just like running into something.
Yeah, yeah, it's really scary because there's actually not that many things to run into out in the wild. And so at one point I was on an incline, I was going like downhill and I had like nothing around me and I had no way of stopping. But yeah, it
What
was good
happened?
fun. That was a new thing in my life. How are you?
Oh, no, I'm very good. I've just had a very exhilarating kind of hour and a half
Yeah,
because Sheen and I went for a little walk to the local shops to get some supplies for the older Ramadan. So we
yeah.
were stocking up on porridge and oats and all that kind of stuff. And then when I got back, I was like, you know what? I could do some work, or I could log into World of Warcraft and see what's going on. And I logged in, and I saw that there were only like 4 of my guild members online. So I was like, okay, nothing's going to happen. But then I noticed one of the guild members is a warrior who had posted in our Discord a few days ago saying that he was down, like he's like very highly rated in 2v2 arena on WoW. And he was saying that he enjoys playing with friends. So if any guildies want him to help him out in arenas, then he'll play with them. And so I messaged him on WoW, being like, "Hey, I'm a holy paladin. I'm a healer. Do you want to do some arena 2v2?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." So we hopped on Discord and we played, I think, like 25 games, and we ended up winning like 16 of them. And it
Oh,
was just
nice.
so exhilarating because it was like 2v2 PvP style,
Yeah, it's
where
intense.
he's like really good. And so even though I wasn't very good, he was semi carrying me. It was like that feeling of playing badminton doubles with someone who's really good. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not that I was contributing nothing, but the fact that he was so good like really elevated my play as well. So when I kind of
Right.
get us out from like, we're both on 5% health and I pop the perfect abilities and we get back up, or when someone dies and I feed him a finishing blow while he's like stunned or something like that. Oh, it's such a great feeling.
Ah.
And obviously he's doing the bulk of the work, but I get the bulk of the satisfaction for sure. So that was really, really, really good. It's been so long since I've had that sort of video gaming experience. I just love it.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I think that I like the badminton doubles analogy. That's something. You're speaking my language. I never
Mm.
did too much WoW arena stuff myself, so I didn't really empathize with that side of things. But that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, dude, it was so good. And then, this is why we were meant to record this podcast an hour ago. I was like, look, man,
Yes,
I'm in the
yes,
middle of
we were.
arenas. Can you can you allow me for an hour or so? And yeah, worked out really nicely. Before we continue, worth saying up front that this episode is brought to you by none other than Brilliant. Tamil, take it away.
Why do I always do the brilliant one? Why don't you do it this
Because you're
time?
the math guy. Come on.
All right. Brilliant is the best way to teach yourself maths, physics, or computer science online. They have a bunch of classes on a bunch of different topics. And crucially, it's not really school style maths. It's really about actually helping you understand the concepts and develop the intuition rather than kind of go through the process of learning some method and solve these 20 equations. It's not that kind of thing. It's really about building understanding, which I think is what maths is really about. And so if you fancy learning maths for reals, brilliant.org/not overthinking will help.
Yeah, and if you're one of the first 200 people to hit that link this week, you will get 20% off the annual premium subscription. So yeah, genuinely give it a go. Thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring the episode and continuing to support this podcast. Speaking of podcasts, I listened to a really good one yesterday. Do you know this guy called Tom Bilyeu?
No.
He's got this podcast and this sort of whole media empire called Impact Theory. He's always in the top like 10 business podcasts on iTunes. It's the same sort of stuff as like the Tim Ferriss show kind of vibes. And I'd seen him around. He's got like kind of 2 million subscribers on YouTube, so like pretty big deal overall. I've seen him around, but never really seen any of his stuff. I just sort of lumped him in the category of self-help interview podcast, and I suppose he is in a way. But yesterday evening, I was listening to an episode of the Dave Asprey podcast. Dave Asprey is this dude who's big on like biohacking and has another one of those like self-help interview podcasts where he was interviewing Tom Bilyeu, and I was like, okay, let me find out what this Tom Bilyeu guy's about. And he was sick. It was really, really good. A lot of interesting insights. Like this guy Tom, he says the single best decision he ever made in his life was marrying his wife, and the
Wow.
second was like going into business with his wife. So he and his wife have been like business partners for 15 years now, something like that.
Sick.
So he had a lot of interesting things to say about like how to make a relationship work, and I think one thing that was good about him, and I think this is the mark of a good podcast guest in this sort of genre, is that they make very bold claims
Nice.
and
Yeah.
very,
Bit of
very
edge.
large oversimplifications. Like, the host asked him, what are 3 books you would recommend? Immediately he said, Mindset by Carol Dweck is the single most important book in the English language. It's like, okay, that's a pretty strong statement, but yeah, I can get bored with that.
Yeah.
He said he has this thing where he says something like, the single most important thought process you can have, or the single most important belief anyone can have, is to have a growth mindset. And he's just like very, very bullish on that. And just the conviction and simplicity with which he says all this stuff
Yeah.
feels like, oh, this guy knows his stuff.
Yeah.
And there's none of this kind of caveating and hedging and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
that we often do. It's just like, say something, be bold about it. And
Yeah.
everyone, like, I've been finding this when it comes to the book writing process as well, where my book proposer collaborator guy and my editor keep on pushing back on me when I say that this claim feels too strong, and they say that's like, look, when someone's reading a book, they will hedge for you. You don't need to
Yeah.
hedge
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
Like when you make a strong claim, they will trust the reader to not be dumb and not take a claim at face value. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. This Tom Bilyeu guy. I'm gonna check out more of his stuff.
Nice. Was there any good insights on the relationships front?
Yes. So one thing that was very interesting was that he said that he and his wife, when they got into business together, they were like, okay, he said to his lawyers, let's make this purely 50-50. Like the lawyers were like, someone needs to have 51% because it causes such a ball ache further down the line if it's purely 50-50. He was like, no, it's going to be purely 50-50. We want this to be as entangled as possible. But crucially, he said that he and his wife got together and they decided that, okay, if there is ever a circumstance where, despite communication, despite all the talking about it in the world, you and I have opposing viewpoints, we're going to go with my viewpoint. So Tom's,
Yeah. Yeah.
like he was going to have the deciding vote in every situation, given
Yeah.
that he was like the kind of CEO guy.
Yeah.
And he said that decision made up front has sort of avoided tons and tons and tons of problems over the years because everyone knows what their roles are. And even
Yeah.
though they're 50-50, it's like, he is still, he's got that decision making power
Yeah.
in the domains that he knows about. In the domains that she knows about, like execution, he's more the vision guy, she's more the execution person. Then she has authority, but he was like, you have to write all these out in advance. And then you've got to be like, well, if there's a gray area, then who's going to decide what, whose gray area that fits in? So
Yeah.
it was interesting how systematic he was and intentional about this whole relationship thing, because it can be tricky, apparently, going into business with someone that you're married to.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah. It's also common startup wisdom where even if you have two equal co-founders, you need to agree beforehand who has the final say, basically. Otherwise, you're going to get into tough spots.
Yeah.
Nice.
There were a few other things from this episode that I wrote down. So one thing that he said, which sort of stuck with me, was that every single weekday, if I'm awake, I'm either working or working out.
Wow.
It's like, damn, okay, that's a lot. But he was his whole thing was very like it was very hustle culture-y, but like in a nice way. In that he was like, look, man, the weekend's for work and the weekend is for play, and I'm going to be intentional and efficient about all the things I want to do because I want to be the next Walt Disney, and that requires hustling hard and getting my team of high performers and this sort of thing. And he was like just very unapologetic about like even if I'm on the toilet, I'm listening to a podcast or audiobook. If I'm eating, I'm listening to a podcast, and it's unusual to hear that in 2021, where at least the people I follow on Twitter have started to push back against this sort of narrative.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah,
like, hey, it's not all about that. But I thought there was something very inspiring about how he was like, no, I've got my vision. This is what I'm going to do. The
yeah.
weekends are for fun, and the weekdays are purely for work and working out.
That is very interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's not a very fashionable thing to. I think just saying that you work a lot is not a very fashionable thing, or like advocating for working a lot is yeah, very unfashionable nowadays. So well
This
done
is
to him
something.
for doing this.
This is something that Elizabeth and I have been talking about recently. So, like in the sort of medic YouTuber community of which has swelled in its ranks in the last few years, there is this ongoing debate. Like someone will post a 14-hour study with me video, and then someone on Twitter will screenshot the 14-hour study with me video and saying this is wrong. This is what is wrong with the world. These medics are promoting toxic productivity. And it's like a bizarre state of affairs where on the one hand you're told to be authentic and to be the real you, and if you're a medical student and a YouTuber, then obviously you do, you know obviously you hustle quite hard because it's hard to be a medical student and a YouTuber and stuff at the same time. And people tell you they want to see the real you, and but as soon as you say that you work or you kind of lost out on sleep because you were busy editing a video or doing an essay or something, suddenly the Twitter mob will come after you for promoting bad mental health and promoting toxic productivity. And so
Yeah,
it feels like you're allowed to be you're told to be the authentic self, but only if the authentic self is kind of promoting all of the ideals that the Twitter mob would like to espouse,
yeah.
like such as good work-life balance and sleeping 8 hours a day and not working beyond 5 p.m. and that kind of vibe.
That's so funny. Have you ever received accusations of promoting toxic productivity?
I'm sure I have. I don't see them very often because if someone is if I'm being subtweeted, it's
Yeah.
rare that it gets back to me.
Mm.
There was that forum which I haven't checked in several weeks,
Yeah.
so maybe there was stuff around toxic productivity there, but I don't know. I don't think I promote toxic productivity. Like my whole spiel is have fun, guys. Like it's all good. I'm not really sure what to think on that. So the analogy that comes to mind is you probably wouldn't have seen, but a few weeks ago, Dwayne the Rock Johnson tweeted that he was a photo of himself having cupping therapy.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're familiar? So cupping therapy is the alternative medicine thing where they put cups on you and you end up with these like huge ass bruises.
Yeah. Yeah.
Allegedly, this was something that was used by the Prophet, peace be upon him, back in the day and stuff. And so there's quite a lot of religious baggage associated with cupping around among some people. A lot of people view it as like, oh my God, this is amazing. Michael Phelps apparently does it and thinks it's amazing.
Yeah.
But so The Rock tweeted a photo of it, and one of my friends, whose name is Rohin, who is another medic YouTuber. So he's like an actual doctor, like a I think nearly consultant cardiologist. He's got a channel called Med Life Crisis, where he does like genuinely medical topics rather than just generic productivity. He
Yeah.
replied to The Rock saying, hey, great to see that you're taking your health seriously, but I'd be careful about promoting alternative medicine that doesn't have an evidence base. And he just posted that, and The Rock gets zillions of replies to his tweets.
Yeah.
But The Rock replied to this guy's tweet,
Really nice.
saying something to the effect of, "Hey man, I'm just sharing what I was doing. No need to hate on it. Like you do you, I'll do me. That kind of thing. Good vibes all around. That kind
Yeah.
of vibe." And then Rohin's point, which he replied and then made a subsequent video about, was, yes, you do you, but given that you have such a big platform, there is a level of responsibility on you to think about how even the stuff that you do implicitly promotes that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're implicitly promoting something that doesn't have any evidence around healthcare and stuff like around this sort of alternative medicine thing, that could be potentially problematic. And just think about it a little harder.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that when it comes to this kind
Did
of
Rob
medics
reply to that?
promoting.
Or, Rob didn't reply after that.
No, he didn't reply after that, sadly.
Okay.
I think it's a good point. It's like this balance of, you know, let's say I work 18 hours a day. Is it acceptable for me to make a vlog talking about how I work 18 hours a day? Because it would promote people thinking that, oh, I should be working 18 hours a day, which is not generally the sort of advice I would want to give. Or what is that, like deontology or something, where it's like, or work or Kantian ethics, where it's like operate on the maxim that everyone will do the thing that you're doing.
Right.
And if you'd be okay with everyone doing it, it makes it morally right. And if you wouldn't, it makes it morally wrong. It's like, it feels like there's an element of that which comes up against the be yourself, show your authentic self, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. I think when most people think about the Twitter mob and think about this stuff, it's sort of presented in a way that like something has gone wrong if this is where we're ended up. Where like if you make a video about how you work 18 hours a day, then the Twitter mob goes after you. And even when you're framing this discussion right now, you're framing it as if we're in some kind of failure mode here, where you sort of you can't be your authentic self. You know, the Twitter mob wants you to be your authentic self, but then when you're authentic about certain things and they're not a fan. I mean, there's also the possibility that this isn't a failure mode and everything is working as intended. Like if people think you're doing something wrong, they'll call you out on it and you can have a discussion about it and you can decide how to handle it. And sometimes you'll conclude actually the mob is correct and I will no longer do this thing. And sometimes you'll conclude screw the mob. I'm gonna continue making these videos. And that seems like it seems like a decent state of affairs. Like people giving each
yeah,
other feedback, having discussions, like it's not terrible.
yeah. I mean, it's not terrible. I think generally the Twitter mob is less about opening up a dialogue and more about, this is what is wrong with the world, subtweeting someone, not tagging them, not linking the video, so they won't even know that they're being talked about
Yeah.
necessarily, unless someone be like, oh, by the way, do you realize your video was screenshotted in that tweet, which then somehow got like 18,000 retweets from doctors all around the world? You're like, oh shit, okay, wow. Like that kind of thing isn't quite in the interest of promoting
Yeah, sure.
promoting dialogue. But no, I mean, it makes sense. It's totally reasonable for people to be
Yeah.
able to call someone out if they feel like what they're doing is
Yeah,
bad.
that's fine. Yeah, I think the thing about the toxic productivity stuff, and I've talked about this before, is that people are people are coming from different starting points. You know, if you're someone who produces productivity related content, just by virtue of that, you probably enjoy producing productivity related content, and you working 18 hours a day is much more in line with you living your best life, doing what you enjoy and flourishing in your own way, compared to someone who is trying to force themselves to work 18 hours a day doing something that doesn't constitute them living their best life and flourishing in their own way. And like, this guy who wants to be, what was his name? The guy you mentioned at the start of the podcast?
Tom Billieu.
Tom Billieu, yeah. Dude probably loves it. Dude's having a blast.
Oh yeah, having a great time.
He's living his best life. And the I think the mistake is to take, interpret things I guess at the wrong resolution or whatever, or sort of, you know, you could interpret that and think, oh man, this guy's advocating for everyone to, even if you work at some random job that you don't like, he's saying that you should like work really hard during the week and then only chill on the weekends. That's not what he's saying, you know. And so, yeah, my issue with the productivity thing is that I think the people on whom it has more of a negative effect, it's because you're trying to apply it to something that is to you very different what the productivity guru is the thing is to them. Do you know what I mean?
I guess it's like anything where if you have a platform and you're promoting a certain kind of lifestyle, yes, you can say, "Hey, it's just me. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what I do."
Yeah.
But if you're like The Rock, for example, and you're saying, "I work 18 hours a day," a lot of people are going to be like, "Look, man, this is promoting bad mental health practices amongst the youth of today." Even if it is just what he does, and he just freaking loves going to the gym all the time, but like that nuance is lost.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. So right now I'm making a comment on the people who watch these videos and feel bad.
Mm.
Okay. And then there's a separate, and I'm trying to say this is this is where they're kind of missing the point and kind of taking things in the wrong way. All right, so that's one thing. And then, yeah, the other thing is, you know, if there are tangible negative effects of what you're doing, then you should probably think about it a bit and, caveat, just caveat things. Say at the start of a video, hey man, I'm Dwayne the Rock Johnson, and
And this
I
is
do,
what I'm
I,
not saying.
yeah, and maybe there is a need for some caveating.
How do we get onto this? Oh, Tom Billy stuff, yeah. Um, so that was interesting. He had a few other nuggets that I wrote down. One of them was, I guess, kind of like written down. It sounds a bit weird, but he apparently often asks himself, "Do I meet the minimum requirements for this thing that I'm trying to do? And if I do, then I'm going to act as if I can be literally the best in the world at this thing that I'm trying to do." And so it's sort of like growth mindset, but with a level of realism applied. Like, if you're 4'8", you probably don't meet the minimum requirements to join the NBA. Therefore, like, however much you try, you're not going to make it into the NBA.
Yeah, yeah,
And so, I thought this was interesting. His for his one, it's like, do I meet the minimum requirements? Am I at minimum smart enough to potentially be as successful as Walt Disney? You're
yeah,
like, oh, I'm not the smartest in the world, but yeah, I think I meet the minimum requirements. Now everything else is skills to be learned on top of that.
yeah,
So everything, skills in managing companies, skills in business, building business community, blah blah blah. It's all stuff. Once you've taken that minimum threshold thing, I thought that was interesting because I hadn't come across the minimum threshold model before.
yeah. That's
The other
cool.
one was there was a thing that he said which is interesting. He was like, yes, yes, a pig is never going to become a racehorse, but with enough training, it can be a pretty damn fast pig. And I really like that one as well. I think that was a nice, quippy defense against the. I think there's amongst the people who don't kind of live and breathe this sort of personal development stuff, there is a false assumption that, yeah, for example, like the 10,000 hour rule, which is supposed to be for kind of achieving mastery, like world class mastery in anything, where people would kind of dismiss it, be like, "Oh, I don't have the raw talent to be like world class at this thing, therefore I'm not going to try." But you can still be kind of top 1% in basically anything, regardless of what the raw talent is, if you just try hard enough at it. So I like this kind of fast pig versus racehorse kind of metaphor.
I'm not a huge fan of the framing of any of these things, to be honest. Uh,
Yeah, it's got a very kind of competitive kind of framing.
yeah, I often hear people expressing some kind of sentiment of like, you know, this thing is only worth doing or worth trying at if I can get really, really good at it relative to other people. And I don't want to do things that you know, that I won't be really, really good at relative to other people, kind of thing. And yeah, this whole competition thing, man, I really don't know where I stand on competition. I think it's like,
What do you mean you don't know where you stand on this competition thing?
yeah, I think competition is like 90% problematic, but there is some kind of it that is maybe okay. Yeah, I'm really not a fan of competition in general, and I think it's always a bit iffy if someone describes themselves as very competitive.
Mm.
I struggle to think of a wholesome way to be competitive. Yeah, I just think like a mindset of competition is very, very, very rarely coming from a good place. What do you think? I think it's all it's coming from a place of like just like viewing your comrades as adversaries of like, oh, I need to be better than these people or whatever. Um, or it could be coming from a place of like, I want social validation by external attributes about myself, which I think will make people like me more. Um, or it's coming from a place of I will be okay if, you know, like I really struggle to imagine competitiveness coming from a good place. Now, I think the exception is I, d- I, th- I think in the realm of games, like sports, for example, I think in a when the setup is deliberately a competition and everyone is opting in to compete with one another for sport, and I'm using sport in pretty broad terms, then I can maybe get on board with it, and I think that can be done in a way, and that can be approached in a way that is good. But outside the very narrow confines of literal competitive events, I think I think yeah, just approaching things from a lens of competition and sort of being competitive about things, I struggle to see it coming from a good place.
Is it? Do you struggle to see it coming from a good place if Jeff Bezos is like, I want Amazon to be the biggest retailer in the world?
Yeah, I don't know. I think yeah, goals is another thing. I think we touched on this. We talked about goals at one point. I can't remember if we had Mac on the podcast for this. This was just a conversation I had with Mac. So like Mac, who's been a guest on the podcast a few times, he's really into sort of sports types like cycling, Ironmans, that kind of thing. And a big part of that is, I mean, like he enters competitions for this stuff. And so he has goals like, I want to qualify for whatever tournament this year, that kind of thing, or like I want to get to a certain position in this tournament or something. Um, and I think if Jeff Bezos says I want Amazon to be the biggest retailer in the world, I think it's a different kind. It's qualitatively different from you know I want I want to come top of my year in my exams, or you know I want to be better than the Joneses at I don't know what do people compete on these days. I want to be better at so and so on some musical instrument, or like I want to yeah, whatever.
What if it's, I want to be better than Joneses because I want to land that promotion to become partner and there's only one of them going, therefore I need to be better than these other five candidates that are applying for the same thing?
Uh, yeah, sure, but that is a sort of specifically constructed competition that you are
Okay.
in for this one job or whatever, right? Like it's
I mean, I
that's
struggle. Like,
an
what sort of
objective
examples are you
reality.
thinking of where there's not a specially constructed? I mean, I want to rank first in the year group because I want the gold medal prize, and it'll be good for my CV, and it'll be fun, fun little challenge. Let's give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, look, it comes down to like why do you want the gold medal prize,
Hmm.
you know? And again, I think in that question, I struggle to imagine it coming from a good place most of the time.
What do you mean, like a good place? Like,
Huh?
yes, sure. So you're saying if you want a certain accolade, chances are it comes from a place of insecurity where you feel like you're not enough without the accolade.
I think there's a good chance of that. There's a good chance it comes from a sort of yeah, like a zero sum mindset, not
What do you mean
viewing.
by zero sum mindset?
Sorry,
What do you mean by that?
like a mindset of one person can only succeed at the cost of someone else like not succeeding or whatever, right? Like I just
I don't
really
know.
struggle to imagine it coming from a good place.
I mean, I think so. Your broad point is, in general, competition equals bad because I struggle to see it coming from a good place.
A competitive mindset or a mindset of competition. is bad most of the time,
Okay.
outside the confines of like a
An actual
literal
competition.
competition.
Yeah.
You know? And
Uh,
look, it's tricky because I do think, pursuing excellence, pursuing excellence in something, I think is good. It's good. It's to be encouraged, but it shouldn't come from a place of I want to pursue excellence in this thing so that I can beat other people in this thing, so that other people will like me or think I'm a worthy human being or whatever, right? Or
okay,
I
sure.
can feel like I think there is a healthy way to pursue excellence, but I think
But that
pursuing excellence from a mindset of competition, I don't know if that it ain't it. This ain't it, chief.
I think your broader beef is with the idea of doing anything or having any sort of mindset
Full stop.
where
That's it.
yeah, just any kind of mindset is bad. um, any kind of mindset where there is a level of wanting our internal self-esteem to come from an external factor. So you could say the same thing about what's the real reason why you want to buy an Apple Watch. If the real reason is because you want to signal your identity to yourself and others, that's probably a bit problematic. Um, Equally, what's the real reason for taking part in this competition? Is it because you want to signal your status to others in some way by winning? That's probably problematic. I think your beef isn't with the competition, it's with any realm in which the reason for doing the thing is because you're coming from a place of I will be okay if I get this
Yeah,
particular accolade.
yeah, correct. And I think probably like 60% of competitive mindsets stem from that.
Okay, that's a hugely arbitrary kind of.
Fine, 50 to 70.
Okay,
What?
fine,
What?
whatever. Giving a range. Yeah, fine.
What do
So,
you think?
I mean, I don't like to, I don't like to
I don't like to plant a
opine
flag in
about
the
other
ground.
people's mindsets.
Sorry, what?
I don't like to opine about other people's mindsets
Why?
around certain things,
Why?
unless it's a field in which I have enough data points to have a reasonable read on. Okay, I've spoken to like 30 people about this thing, and like 28 of them feel this way about competition. I just don't have that data around the idea of competition, and
I don't
certainly
think
when I
that
think,
I don't think this is a problem of data. All right, just provide me a theory, or just like give me some possible explanations for.
okay,
uh,
winning a competition, even if it's not explicitly a competition, the beating of other people in insert domain here leads to better life outcomes for myself.
Okay,
I think that makes up a huge chunk of the things. Like for example,
okay, dude, like, but okay, better life outcomes for myself could mean a million things. Like, 80%, sorry, 70 to 90% of better outcomes for myself are, you know, stem from my peers will think better of me, people will value me more highly, all this kind of stuff. Like, better outcomes for myself is kind of begging the question. I'm trying to get
okay,
at, like,
fine.
what is the
Okay,
better outcome for myself?
will lead to a will be more likely to lead to an increase in my salary.
Sorry.
Will be more likely to lead to an increase in my salary, or will be more likely to lead to an increase in the opportunities that I am afforded. Will be more likely to lead to an increase in people wanting me as a guest on their podcast.
um
The example I'm thinking of in my head is this thing about my goal of wanting to hit the New York Times list with this book that I'm writing, which
okay.
isn't which is not from a place of I will be okay if I hit this goal, and without hitting this I feel like inferior in my self-worth. It's literally that hitting this list will actually be interesting for my life, because of the opportunities that come that are associated with that. And in a way, that is an arbitrary competition where you have to kind of be in the top 10 nonfiction hardback books sold that week. But I'm pretty sure the place it's coming from is not a place of competition. Like, I'm not even thinking about the other competitors in the field. What I'm thinking about
So
is
then why do you view this why are you viewing this as an example of me hogging against competition if you don't
because
actually view it as competition?
because it is a competition.
Sorry?
Because it is a competition. I want to hit the list is an implicit like it's a competition.
I don't certainly the way you're presenting it is not it's a competition. For example, suppose that you needed to, get some minimum grade in your university degree to then like you know, qualify for some job or something.
Yep.
It's like I wouldn't say that's like a competitive. That's really a sort of, you don't need a competitive mindset to decide that, okay, I need to like get this minimum grade to then get this
Okay.
job. That's kind of how you're presenting this New York Times thing of like,
Mm.
oh, if I want to, I'm my career is as a creator or whatever, I make my money going on podcasts and stuff like this, and you know, me having extra accolades helps with that.
Hmm.
Like I think the book thing is, I mean, it's just a weird example.
Okay. Okay, let me give you another one. In third year, I decided that I really wanted to try and rank first in the year group when I was doing psychology. I don't think I had a competitive mindset around it. I had more of a mindset of it would be cool to try and go for this gold medal thing, and I know there's a prize associated with it. And I actually don't care what other people are doing. I'm not trying to beat other people. I'm just trying to get to as close to 100% as possible myself. Like I didn't during that kind of competition, I didn't once think, oh, I wonder what other people are doing, other than when I was in the exam hall and it was like me and this other girl, well, the ones who had the most paper written in the exam. We're like, oh, interesting. But again, uh, is that like, does that not count as competition because I wasn't thinking about the competitors and instead just thinking, how can I get as close to 100% as possible?
I don't know, man. You tell me. Like, yeah, if what you're saying is true, then you know, this doesn't seem sort of like a competitive thing. I also think there's a decent chance you're deceiving yourself about like, oh no, I just did it for the bands kind of thing. Like, I don't know if I'll take your word for it, but based on what you're saying, yeah, I don't think it doesn't seem like a competition thing, if that's what you're
Okay.
saying.
So give me an example of yourself or someone that you know where there is a competitive mindset which is coming from a bad place.
Look, it's hard for me. I think it's a stretch for me to specifically say that someone else's competitive mindset is coming from a bad
Okay.
place. The point I'm making is the wider structural issue here. And so
Hmm.
I'm not gonna say that like, oh, my mate Bob, right, he's got a competitive mindset coming from a bad place.
Yep.
I'm not gonna say anything like that, but I certainly know people who strongly dislike losing at anything.
Mm.
I, probably doesn't come from a good place. Uh,
Mm.
Certainly know people who, I think,
I mean, I dislike losing when I'm playing an arena in World of Warcraft. I think that comes from a particularly bad place.
sorry?
I dislike losing when I'm in a 2v2 arena match in
Yeah,
World of
look, there's different ways of disliking things, sure. But again, I think that's qualitatively different. I think de definitely people's motivations for things are often in order to beat other people at those things.
Warcraft.
Like,
Yeah, I think when I was younger in school, like the desire to rank first in the year every year was definitely a competitive thing, where there was definitely a
where did that come from? Why did you care about that?
I think if I were to psychoanalyze my younger self, it was a case of my whole identity being tied up in that, and therefore
Okay.
me feeling I will be okay if I
Yeah,
retain my
I'm.
position.
Yeah, I deserve my place on this planet if I can, like.
Yes, if I can continue my yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, probably not a particularly good place to.
yeah. Yeah, it's that kind of stuff that I'm talking about.
Hmm.
And yeah, look at university. There were plenty of people who definitely had this sort of competing against other people sort of mindset of like, I mean, very concretely, there are things like, oh, I'm not going to share my notes with people doing
Yeah,
the same subjects as me.
sure.
I really can't imagine that coming from a good place.
Hmm.
And yeah, the point I was making was that, and actually, yeah, I guess partly why I feel semi-strongly about this is that competitiveness is often presented as like a positive thing. It's like, people take pride in being competitive.
Hmm.
We were talking about like Tinder tropes or dating app
Hmm.
tropes. One dating app tropes. I mean, one of the prompts is like I'm overly competitive about X.
Hmm.
And one like really common thing. that I've seen people write in their profiles is I'm overly competitive about everything, and yeah, it's like it's something people take a little bit of pride in. It's seen as like kind of a good thing to be competitive, and that's what I'm trying to push back against.
Yeah, fair. I can get on board with that.
So yeah, I really can't see it coming from a good place most of the time.
Hmm.
And like, look, it certainly leads to good outcomes. Like if you hear the way a lot of very quote unquote successful people talk about things, there's definitely a large element of having a chip on your shoulder early on in life and feeling like you have something to prove. And literally, I can be okay if kind of thing. Like so many people have it, and I think that's partly why the competitiveness thing is kind of seen as a good thing because yes, like it does lead to externally better outcomes. Like if if you are a very competitive person, you will probably try harder at certain things. You'll probably you're potentially more likely to succeed in whatever thing you're trying to do because you care about beating the other people. And so I think that's why it's seen as kind of a positive thing because a lot of the successful people are very competitive and it's probably contributed to their success.
Hmm.
But my point is, I doubt it comes from a good place, and I'm sure there is a wholesome way to to get that motivation
Yeah,
and pursue excellence.
fair play. I can get on board with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's my spiel about competition. I also had a thought recently about work. I found myself, I think yesterday, yeah, probably like yesterday slash today, feeling a general sense of kind of like, oh man, I need to like do some work. I
Hmm.
have a lot of work to do. I need to do some work.
Hmm.
Okay, can you ever feel that way?
Yes. I'm very interested in what you're about to say because this is the sort of stuff I'm into in book research as well. I'm like, oh, hello. This feeling of I have to do work. Interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah, so I felt this feeling of I have to do some work, and that sort of that sort of sounded the problematic alarm in my head, basically.
Okay.
That sounded the problematic alarm in my head, and I mean, I've talked about similar things before, where I think it's easy to get caught up in the feeling of doing work and the idea of getting work done and not actually achieving the outcomes you care about, and so I felt myself thinking, oh man, I've got so much work to do. I need to do like a lot of work this weekend or whatever. And that kind of came with a sort of level of kind of some sort of negative feelings of like anxiety or whatever that like I
Mm.
have all this work to do. And and then I thought like, why am I framing it as like I have to do work? And
Yeah.
then and then I kind of I thought that yeah, framing it as like work in the abstract, I think is why my problematic alarm bells went off because I think work in the abstract, like thinking about anything as work in the abstract, it's
Makes it
stupid.
feel
Like,
less fun. Yeah.
well, yeah, there's like so much baggage associated with it that like yeah, if you're ever thinking about work in the abstract, you're just screwing yourself, I think. And so then I kind of thought, okay, look, why am I thinking about it as work in the abstract? What do I actually have to get done? And then I
Mm.
thought, oh yeah, I need to finish our sort of revamped marketing sites for Causal this weekend. And then I thought, that's actually really fun. Like that is like right on my street. That is my jam. Like, and then when I thought, okay, I need to finish the marketing site this weekend, then it didn't have the feelings of anxiety and like, oh man, I have to work. It had a feeling of like, oh cool, this is like this is a thing I'm into. Like why would I feel bad about this? And so I think, yeah, I think the insight, if you will, the concrete takeaway is that thinking about work as an abstract concept and framing anything as work as an abstract in the abstract is a it's just is bad. And if you think about what you're actually trying to achieve and what you actually need to do or whatever, then I think your feelings towards the thing will be very different.
Hmm. That's interesting. That's a good insight.
What do you reckon?
Uh,
Now tell me
yeah.
what book you've read this in. No, Tiago Forte came up with this in 2018. Why haven't you done building
I'm
a
actually
second
writing
brain?
about this. This was going to be Hashtag OC.
Wait, what?
Uh, this was going to be original content. I've got a chapter in the book around mindset surrounding work,
Hmm.
where about this thing of feeling as if we. I mean, there's a few different things here. It's like, yes, I agree. The general abstract notion of work just feels a bit grim. Um, and yeah, it's like I often have that like slight surprise when, for example, I'm doing something on the computer at like 11 p.m. and Sheen asks me, "Why are you working so late?" And the
Hmm.
framing of that question always surprises me a little bit because, like, oh, am I working? Oh, I guess this is work. Um, but it's just not how I consider it when I'm doing it. And actually, like this weekend, I also had a thing of, okay, I need to work on Sunday, and then I like literally
In the
this morning
abstract.
in the abstract, and then
Okay.
literally this morning I had the thought that no, I shouldn't think of it as work. Like, what do I actually need to do? I need to. Oh well, I want to kind of do another draft of chapter one of the book, and then I'm going to film this video around passive income. That's pretty fun. That was like my exact thought process this morning.
Oh wow,
Um,
nice.
I think it's sort of like one thing I often advise students when it comes to is I need to study chemistry feels like feels really bad,
Yeah.
but I need to do some questions at the end of chapter one feels like very very reasonable. It's like when you actually know what you have to do, like it's like when you don't have clarity. Clarity is the thing. Anytime there is an item on the to do list that doesn't have clarity, it
Yeah.
is a total it really really sucks. And this is why no one studies like I have to study today. It's like okay, well if you just define what you actually are going to do, it would be a lot more fun. So work is kind of I have to study chemistry, but like one layer abstracted from that. Like, oh, I have to work tonight.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just makes it feel awful. The other thing that ties in with this, which I think about a lot, is have to versus get to.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think like when you're like when you think, oh, I have to work, and it's like, oh, actually, I get to revamp the causal marketing side. That's kind of fun. Even
Yeah. Yeah.
like I often like deliberately use that shift.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
even
I'm
have
a fan of
a
that.
post-it note on like literally in front of my monitor saying this is going to be fun. And anytime I just it's like you know it's been there for a couple of weeks now. But anytime I just read that, I just think this is going to be fun. I just like automatically like, oh yeah, I am actually having a good time. This
Yeah.
is one of the
Yeah.
things just to remind myself to enjoy the things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. I think in addition to like the feeling thing, it also if you consider what you're doing to be, I don't know, I have to study in the abstract or I have to work in the abstract, then your compass will be pointed towards feeling like you are studying in the abstract and feeling like you're working in the abstract. Whereas if the thing in your head is, I need to like do X, I need to do this specific thing, or I need to
yeah,
like accomplish this specific thing, then your compass will be pointed towards doing that specific thing. And I feel like you're much less likely to get caught up in the sort of in work theater or study
the theater
theater.
of work. Yeah,
Yep.
yep,
Yeah, I feel like study theater. I think we've talked about this. I think study theater was a big thing at school and university. Where I think there was a general sense of, oh man, I need to study in the abstract. I mean, right, in the abstract is like no one's actually thinking that in their head, but
perhaps
yeah,
people
maybe,
should start thinking that in their heads.
yeah,
It just
yeah,
highlights how ridiculous this thing is.
yeah. Anytime you think of the word, think of the idea of work or study in a
Yeah, just
in a non-specific
pretend
context, you have to add
in
in
the
the
abstract.
abstract
Yeah.
in your head. Yeah. How stupid does that sound? Oh, I
Oh,
have
it's
to work
Sunday
in the
night. I'm going to work in the abstract tomorrow.
I love it.
Yeah, that's funny.
Um, yeah, that's my productivity advice for the year.
Excellent. Please do keep it coming. This is good fodder for the book.
Nice. Cool. I think we should wrap things up there because I do actually need to work in the abstract.
Great. I need to write my newsletter in the abstract. So, I've been slacking on the newsletter front a bit. I just can't be bothered to bring and maintain consistency with it anymore.
Really?
I think the issue there is that like all of the writing that I'm doing is for the book these days, and so in a way I don't want to. Oh, I suppose actually I could just put segments on the newsletter and just see how they land. That would be easy to do. But it feels like for the past few months, it's felt like when I need to do a newsletter issue, it's like, oh, I need to do this extra thing, and I really don't want to do this extra thing. But the only reason I'm doing it is because it's a means to an end of building the list. But if I have a more concrete, I wrote some stuff around chapter 1 today, chuck it into newsletter format, copy and paste, send it out, see
Yeah.
how people like it.
Like you know how I approach this, Ali? It's all about repurposing content for different platforms.
Really?
That's how I
Oh,
think.
tell me more.
All right, we'll wrap things up there. I'll read out a review. This is a 5-star review from Paulie Calzoni in the United States. It's entitled "My Favorite Wasteman Pod." Oh, this is Paul. This is our good friend Paul Millard. Paul
Oh,
says,
no.
was on the pod once and it was grand. I challenged Ali to take a week off from YouTube and I think he actually increased his output after our chat. Incredible. Now to listen to the pod, Tamor makes me message him every time I hear his voice. Quite needy, but worth the price. Good pod. Um, thank you, Paul, for the review.
Good stuff, Paul. Yeah, I think Paul was the first person to suggest that I could take a break from my newsletter, and now I've taken many breaks from my newsletter in the last year. So thank you for that, Paul, if you're listening. The other thing is, I need a brand name for my stationery brand. What should I call it?
Why don't the listeners send in their suggestions?
Good idea. Guys, I'm making a stationery brand. I want it to sound cool. If you have any thoughts, email them or tweet them or comment under this YouTube video. I actually have like thousands of suggestions because I posted on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube community posts. So I literally have thousands to choose from. One
And
that I
none of them are
particularly
good.
like is Vitals. I think Vitals is a nice name.
Oh, that's cool.
Problem with Vitals is it kind of takes itself quite seriously, but you know, it sort of works on those two levels. Being like the Vitals notebook, Vitals pen, Vitals post-it note, that kind of thing. I'm sure we could do like a cool logo around that, maybe with a sort of a nod to the medicine thing. I've been thinking about like Wasteman or something, but like I think that's trying too hard to be funny.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, thank you all for listening and see you next week.
See you next week. Goodbye.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening.
If you like this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on the Apple Podcasts website if you're not using an iPhone. There's a link in the show notes.
If you've got any thoughts on this episode or any ideas for new podcast topics, we'd love to get an audio message from you with your conundrum, question, or just anything that we could discuss.
Yeah, if you're up for having your voice played on the podcast and your question being the springboard for our discussion, email us an audio file MP3 or voice note to hi@notoverthinking.com.
If you've got thoughts but you'd rather not have your voice played publicly, that's fine as well. Tweet or DM us at NOverthinking on Twitter, please.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.